right. Welcome. And so lovely to see everyone here. Yeah. So something I do as a practice when I get into a room, if I'm leading it and I'm doing, especially work with parents who want to raise intuitive children, we do the connection exercise, which is really just, you can pick one person if it's easier with you, whoever you feel the most kind of wanted to send some love juices to or receive from. Or you can just take turn and look at each person and kind of, you know, take in their energy and express this, I see you. And just because when we do that, we actually also experience ourselves present in that moment, right? So it's just so cool. It's like instantly there. It's a great practice to have, with your partners. Pets love it, right? And children as well, definitely. Because when we give our attention is, giving our life force to connect with that. And that's how we create. We're creating with our energy, thoughts, and attention. So that's how powerful our focus is. Because really what comes out of anything we do is because we focused on it, right? All right, I'm already feeling great. So thank you. So I thought I'd open our discussion today for all of us to, have our own take on this topic about what our spirit is and how it feels when we feel it's not free, when it feels somehow enslaved, but we don't know what's enslaving it, right? So I will read this poem that I came across, and here we go. So the question we are having to reflect on and, find our own response to is, what is enslavement of the spirit? So here's the poem. I'm going to read to you. She sat at the back and they said she was shy. She led from the front and they hated her pride. They asked her advice and then questioned her guidance. They branded her loud, then were shocked by her silence. When she shared no ambition, they said it was sad. So she told them her dreams and then they said she was mad. They told her they'll listen, then covered their ears and gave her a hug while they laughed at her fears. And she listened to all of it, thinking she should be the girl they told her to be, best as she could. But one day she asked what was best for herself instead of trying to please everyone else. So she walked to the forest and stood with the trees. She heard the wind whisper and dance with the leaves. She spoke to the willow, the elm, and the pine, and she told them what she's been told time after time. She told them she felt she was never enough. She was either too little or far, far too much, too loud or too quiet, too fierce or too weak, too wise or too foolish, too bold or too meek. Then she found a small clearing surrounded by ferns, and she stopped. And she heard what the trees said to her. And she sat there for hours, not wanting to leave, for the forest said nothing. It just let her breathe. Yeah, I really like to open up with anyone like to share what they're present to after hearing that poem.
I really enjoyed the poem. And the first thing that really comes to mind is because I am a quiet person in general, not on camera, but when I'm out in real life. So it's when you don't speak, someone has to define you because somebody needs to be able to perceive you in some certain way. So we are never actually allowed to be free to just be. So I love how when you're in the presence of nature, or what was always there before any human interaction, it's always been connected to source. You're already accepted to be as you are. So I really find it a really beautiful and refreshing thing to remind ourselves, just where we are living in between worlds, even if it's nature and interacting with humans, how we are navigating our life. We can't have that breathing space. And it's so refreshing that I'm not feeling alone in that.
Yeah, I was just taking a few moments to ground myself. That was a really nice poem. And at the beginning, I felt a bit of that anger of, growing up as a woman, being socialized as a woman and feeling like we have received so much social conditioning where we're, constantly being very critical to ourselves and so on. So there's like the part of like at the very beginning, which I was like, oh my God, this is basically like the patriarchy and like all the systems of oppression together, where it's like no matter what you do, you can never win, right? And so there's like that part where I was feeling kind of like that anger. And then yeah, like the part with the forest, it's just that silence, that stillness, that unconditional loving presence that nature and pets and animals and plants and I mean other living beings, hopefully humans too, but for humans it takes more of a, we have to condition ourselves to get into that space where we can like quiet our minds and hold that loving space. But yeah, the part with the trees, I just felt that as an embrace of, nature holding space for 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 me. Yeah, it was really beautiful. I felt all the things.
That's great. Thank you. As
And
Maria.
thank you. And also for me was I feel like nature is all the time teaching us something. And for me, what I got was what would it take for me to embrace the nature of the human being who is in front of me? What if I put the energy of the tree on that person? What if I put the energy of, this rainy day and this conversation? How powerful it could be, and allow that energy from nature just spread all over around me. And after you say like, okay, get present to who is here, like look one another, was just this, that's nature. Is we are our senses, we are our instincts, and this is existence, like it's doesn't matter if I am quiet, but if you see me and you see through my eyes, we are talking. And that's priceless. It's a nature gift, I would say.
Thank you.
Kendra, thank you so much for offering this poem, because when you had first shared it with us, I was like, oh my gosh, this is me. Like I can totally relate to everything. And living in between worlds just really is that. And to me, like, with the contrast, that's kind of what I experienced as I was reading through the poem. It was like this experience of living in contrast and living in a world where there's this like one side or the other, right? And we're consistently kind of like, this society has taught us to kind of like be in this mode of it's got to be one or the other, all or nothing, right? And so what I have been really focused on cultivating is being the and, like it's like, okay, I can be loud and quiet. I can share my dreams, my big dreams, and I can hide as well, right? And really allowing for all, like really allowing for all the in between, and that it doesn't have to be the all or nothing or one or the other. And so it's so beautiful because the forest for me is exactly where it always brings me back to being in the in between and having it all and allowing myself to have it all. Because yeah, just like the poem had shared, it's like just being in the forest alone just quiets everything. And I'm almost thinking even just like there's this idea of us as spiritual beings in a human body, right? In a human experience. So there's that too, right? It's like you're either human or you're a spiritual being, but it's like, why can't we have it both? Like have it all and really kind of be this spiritual being in a human body and experience both and have it and not seeing it as a separation, seeing it as one. And just finally, just the visual of being in the forest. I actually had an experience even before we had launched Living in Between Worlds. Like it was just right before we had launched the Facebook group. And I just sat, and this is what I do in the forest. I just sit in the forest and I just allow the wisdom to show up. And I just sat there and I noticed all the trees surrounding me, all the tall trees, like from the tall trees to like the details of the moss and like the little critters. It's, to me, I was like, this is our community. This is what it's like to be in a community where we all co-create, where we all come together, and that, yeah, this is the experience of what it means to like be living in the between. We're all in the between, right? So it's just, yeah, it was just such a beautiful experience. And I would love to one day have all of you, like all of us in the forest, and just have that same experience. Like we're just the same as these trees. We're all standing tall and strong. Yeah.
I love what you say, Vanessa. I'm sorry, just like I just got excited because it's just this invitation of be your element and flow with your element. And that's available for all of us. And when I was just really picturing you like in the middle of the forest and being the invitation of that space to show up. It's like, wow, there is no social expectation, right? Like the tree is not like, I expect you to be. No, the nature is in the invitation of you being part of it.
Yeah. Oh, I love all your shares. I'm gonna reflect on how the poem also matches certain experiences in my life and how I interpret it. So you're right. We are aware that we are spiritual beings and we have a physical form, and there are integration information. That's the journey. So I know why I feel so good in nature, and I'm gonna share what that is, because nature does not judge you. That is how come I feel so good and how you feel you belong. So all the stuff before the poem is all the judgments and our belief that we must be something to be accepted, loved, validated, all these things. And it's really due to a programming from our families, cultures, all those things. So, I really would love that we raise our children not believing in their limitation to have, how can we be as parents, hold the space like nature does for us with our child, right? Which is, we have to expand our capacities to understand what it is like. What is it? How does it look like? There's lots of things we have to break free from, because these patterns require us to chisel away and rebuild, So this is a really important topic for me, because we are all this blank slate, in a sense, that gets a program that's written on. And every human being is practically its own unique experiment, until we begin to see the program. And the energy could be more integrated if we don't have to spend so much time focused on undoing the program, right? And we have, because the work is, how do we integrate the body, soul, and mind, right? If we came from the non-physical form and it becomes then embodied through, conception, and cells begins to multiply and we become this physical being. And then in birth, we take a very first life, and that, like, the soul is activated, and our life is a collection of all our breaths, right? That's the story, and it documents it all as is in the moment. And the only real experience is in that moment. And that's the awareness to know how to do that, hold that space. That is the level we have to get to. So when we don't see ourselves in that truth, we're constantly denying and needing to be something else for someone else. That is this skill we're trying to find, right? To navigate. And this space is really for us to explore that and how to redefine things, so that we recognize we are much more than what we thought we are, So yeah. how do we practice? That's the next level. How do we practice? And maybe I'll bring it back to, how do you practice the awareness to have that forest be with you? How you bring that forest with you. Of course, it's great to. I love your photos that I see in your page, Vanessa, when you're in that forest. So I see that one where you're walking on a tree. And the beauty of what Nura is saying about nature, right, is in us. Like the child coming to the world embody nature. They already have it. We just keep disempower them to not trust, not believe that they have that authority, And so we have this constant questioning and doubt. So yeah, how do we bring that into our practice? How do we recognize the enslavement? Because there are certain things that are taught to us, and then we continue on doing it to ourselves now, right? We are now our own. We build it's constructed, and then we kind of keep ourselves imprisoned too, So yeah, what opens up for you to, connect more with nature? I love Vanessa saying about really listen to what does your heart want? Like I really noticed that so many times there are things I say I want to do, and then say, later I don't have time. And then when I reflect back, oh my God, all that stuff I wanted, that's really what I wanted to spend my time to do. And I would sense like how much more enriched I would be if I just did those things instead of trying to argue with myself and somehow decide by some logical means or, yeah. That's Nuria.
What comes up for me is like when we are in our logical mind, everything falls apart because, right? Like there is like, it has to be in this way. So if it has to be in this way, or it should be in this way, there is separation. And it's an expectation of, I have to validate my truth. But if you are like if you're really connected on who you are, like for instance, the tree doesn't need to justify its existence. It's a tree, right? Like the tree is not saying like, I'm a tree. Like, it sounds ridiculous, but seriously, I feel like we are constantly looking for that validation. And sometimes it's so dangerous because sometimes we compromise our truth.
Yes.
I'm a tree. Yeah. Right. And at the same time, this, I don't know, this excuse to not standing for your truth, because it's like, I know that I'm not gonna be heard. So I'm not doing anything to stand for my truth.
I feel that. Yeah, absolutely. I feel that mutes me often. Yeah. And I can see how that plays out from my childhood, right? It's you don't feel there's any effect to speak. So you just stay quiet. Yeah.
And probably we confuse stay quiet with stillness, right? Like that is in nature. Like there is a moment to regroup with the self in capital letters, like regroup with that self. And that doesn't mean that you have to become a pencil, right? From being a tree to being a pencil. Like, no, it's regroup in the stillness of nature, but keeping that truth in your core without looking for that validation. Because at the moment that we're looking for that validation of I'm a tree, we are disappearing. So I think that's why being silent is so dangerous.
I love you bringing the dual nature of silence here. I love it because, I always talk about polarity and duality because it's a misunderstanding of what the thing is. And yeah, there's silence in terms of stillness, of just being the awareness, right? And then there's a silence where you're muting yourself, where you're not being your truth. Yeah. I mean, there's so much conditioning, and this is like intergenerational stuff. So it's, so it's deep. It's deep. Yeah.
And it's in many ways, some families replicate what is in the system, right? Like, what is the norm? What is this social expectation of you, young lady, right? Girls in our culture have to do these.
Yes.
But my nature is free and yeah. But
Yeah.
just keep it, right? Keep it here.
Yeah.
I think something that came for me, I really like, Yandre, how your basic summary of the poem. I mean, I really like when you said, like, you know why we feel so good in nature? It's because nature doesn't judge us. And I think I remember when I was younger, when I started to become aware of my own kind of consciousness when I was younger, I remember one day having the thought in my mind and hearing it of like, oh my God, why am I so judgmental? And that was kind of like the first kind of layer, when you start, realizing that you are not your thoughts. There's like you, and then there's the thoughts. And I was being like, oh my God, where is this judgment coming from? And blah, 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 blah. And I would say to this day, and I think for the rest of my life, the game will always be, how can we aspire to perhaps be closer to what the tree is like versus the human mind that's just constantly kind of, which again, I don't like I know a lot of the times we talk about the mind and kind of like how it's so like square and like critical and this and that, but I love my mind. I love using it to like do spreadsheets and all things like that. But I think it's where, again, integration, learning how to dance with both sides of our brains, learn how to use it in the right context and turn it off when it's not necessary. But I would say at some point you were saying, how can we put these things in practice? I think for me is, number one, have some sense of aspiration to perhaps be less judgmental. And that for me is the constant practice of like observing my thoughts instead of not taking them so seriously. And then again, not judging them if my mind just like decided that it wants to compare, like, yeah, like today it's like, oh, it's so dark. Yesterday was so sunny. Like, how about that? But I would say for me, I love this whole summary of distilling things down to like judgment versus non-judgment, and that it feels so much better when we are not in that judging position. But it's normal throughout the course of our life that we're going to go on and off those tracks. But when we're in that space, like the tree, just observing and appreciating, or just in stillness, in quietness, those are some of my favorite moments of my life. But I also appreciate the chatty mind, but it's about, balancing the two.
I love what you bring up there. I'm gonna let, because the art is really holding two things that actually seem to be opposite, and just sit with it. So, and yeah, I love that you got that awareness, that you hear that voice in your head. Yeah, that's a neat moment, right? In one's sort of development, to catch, yeah. Oh my God. I remember that too. It's like, oh my God, this voice is judging things all the time. And we're not to say to get rid of it, because it's always there to, and it's a function, right? But we don't have to like become one with it, so it's really good to see we can be so much more. Yeah. Yes, Stephanie.
First of all, before I jump in, I love that we can have this conversation. I grew up as a second generation Filipino, very Catholic, but not officially practicing kind of family, just on paper Catholic kind of thing. So this is something we wouldn't talk about. What is spirit? Me, I would be like, when I was a kid, I'd be like, oh, the Holy Spirit, not like anything that is within me. I have a soul, that's it, right? So it's really great to kind of think about just even the evolution of my spirituality in this process. But when we talked about enslavement of the spirit, all of us have brought up some things that actually came up to me in thinking about how do we foster a space where a spirit can be free to be, right? And then we talk about having children to be able to come in just with this unified field of love where we're being accepted as how they are, and we let them to make choices. And then how do we become aware, like even if we're not parents at the moment, we're influencing future generations. and how they can be, so that they don't have to go and wait 40 years and go, oh, you know what, let me analyze all these filters that I'm programming I've had, and have to do all that work, right? The beauty's in the journey, but I mean, I would have loved to do a bit earlier. Like, you know, we have this responsibility as role models, even just in this platform here, how we can educate the younger generations to start to ask the questions, instead of us like with that generational trauma that we've carried on from colonization, like I talk about, like when I think about talking about the spirit, and how Filipinos in pre-colonial times would say things, and it's constantly dismissed as being superstitious, or things that were like, oh, I see ghosts, like it's superstitious or it's evil, or they start to instill fear, guilt, and shame into our programming, when we are just naturally connected to nature with trees. We've always had gods and worship, like, you know, honoring nature and all its goodness, to be told how to be, just like in this poem. Like we are forced to be enslaved. We're forced to let go of these belief systems. But like that comes up to like, how do we as like future parents or people who can encourage the youth to start to have these choices and be like, you know what, yes, you see ghosts, that's great, you know, honor how you are. You're not strange. This is normal. Like, or like, oh, I feel the energy when I'm in the forest. That's great. Like, how do we foster those things instead of them being fearful of feeling like they're weird, right? I mean, we're all connected with spirit, but what does that mean? And even if I just posted this, somebody might be like, what are you talking about? Like, how do we go back and realize like, we just are, this is our true essence. And when we talk about truth, we also have to analyze, whose truth are we looking through? Are we looking through the eyes of how the colonists have programmed us and our parents and future and generations before us, how we were taught? Or are we looking at our absolute truth based on our feeling? So we brought up the feeling. So if we're feeling expansive and comfortable and everything's in flow, then you know it's true from within versus like constricted and like, oh, I don't know, I don't like this feeling. I know when I used to go to church as a kid, I'm just like constricted the whole time, feeling uncomfortable because it's not true to my spirit. So there's a lot of things to talk about enslavement, but that responsibility as a parent or a role model or someone of influence, how can we not continue that enslaving by those belief systems?
Yes, Nuria.
I would say like something that comes up is your cultural practices and what you're experiencing and your religion are not together. And I think we should respect that, because I mean, I grew up because all of those three things create, first of separation, secondly judgment, and it puts you inside of a box. So of course, as you said, Stephanie, I grew up in a really Catholic family, a Mexican, right? So it's like, apparently if you're Mexican, you're a Catholic in general, right? Like the generalization. And I remember that when this movie came up, like Coco, that everybody watched it, like, oh my God, it's phenomenal. Oh, Mexicans, they go like in different realities when they pass away, and that's true. And many people ask me questions about that, right? Like I acknowledge that, yes, my culture is really into that folklore, like the Day of the Dead is something culturally important for us. We honor that in this way, but that means something? No. So giving a kid or a teenager, as you said, we as role models, the opportunity to say, your cultural practice is your cultural practice. You can choose to embrace it or not. Keeping this religion alive, you can choose to keep it alive or not. And there's nothing to do with what you experience as a being and with what you experience to be in touch with, which is totally different, and it transcends what is in this norm, considering norm the cultural practice, considering norm the religion, considering norm what your parents tell you to do, right? Like, it's whatever your experience, and whoever is listening to this is, don't trust me, trust you, because you know. Like really, even though, let's say that we all go right now to nature, the experience will be different for each of us. And the experience, yes, we're going to be on between this battle of what is my logical mind saying about me being here in the middle of the forest, surrounded by these incredible beings. And another thing will be what my body is experiencing and communicating with something that is bigger than me. So it's am I separating myself from nature? Am I separating myself from my element? Am I separating myself from my family if I choose to experience this vibration and this energy? Am I betraying my cultural practice if I choose to believe that there is something bigger than this church as the symbol, as the unifying symbol? If it's not true for you, it's not true for you no matter what. And sometimes that's the invisible silence that we are carrying on. Like, no, I'm not going to experience, because if I experience, my truth can change, and that's not okay. And what is true in my point of view is that nobody's going to ground you if you experience your truth in nature. It's personal. It's a personal experience. It's a living experience. It's your book of experience.
I love that, Nuria, because what came up for me was just this experience of, we were discussing about what it means to connect with that stillness. And that is really, like, that's something that I've been really focused on, just relaxing into my natural rhythm. And really understanding that, just like the trees, like if you look at the trees, it's just there doing its thing, right? So what does our version of us doing our thing look like, right? Like we have, and going back to, we each have our own individual unique experience. We each have our individual, like we know what is a yes or a no for us. And I think for me, like going back to kind of a practice is really about stepping out of the mind and dropping into the body, because the body will always tell us, like, is this a yes or a no? And really kind of allowing ourselves to, like, because I'm sharing this because I kind of had this question, well, how do you tell whether this is my truth or this is someone else's truth, right? And that's where the logical mind tries to kind of get into it and tries to tell you all of the things that you were told before, and here's let's just try to sort out the answer. But it's like, no, if, like, at this moment, am I a yes or a no? Just by, like what Stephanie had said, am I like feeling expansive or am I feeling constrictive? Like, and just checking in. I think that has always been so key for me, and recognizing that I have a choice in this moment on honoring myself, like consciously making a decision, right? If I am going to do something because someone else is wanting me to do something, then this is where, okay, I'm going to deliberately decide that I'm actually going against what I want, but that there's so much empowerment in deliberately deciding that way. Right. And and going back to kind of like what Sonia was sharing about, just loving the mind and loving the brain and having all of these thoughts, right? It is part of our human experience. And I think that there's judgment on having judgments. And it's like letting go of, like, in what ways can we just let go of, like, us having judgments about having judgments? Even that there is like such a freeing experience, because it just, for me, it just allows me to have those judgmental thoughts and then not make it mean anything bad about myself. And I don't have to, enslave myself to that. So, and I think, the experience of like cultures and religions, it's like what comes up for me is like the idea of like labels, right? Anytime we put a label on ourselves, we're enslaving ourselves in some way, right? We're kind of putting ourselves in a box, because labels connect with a lot of like definitions, right? But then again, at the same time, we get to choose how we define those labels for ourselves, right? Like this is where if we allow ourselves to slow down to say, oh, okay, I'm going to bring up money because money is a big thing, right? Like you can either trigger you or you can like really embrace it and love money, right? So that's where it's like, yeah, you get to define what money means to you and what that experience, that relationship, your thoughts about money and how that experience kind of, you can have an experience where you just don't want to think about it, or you can have an experience where you can just love it and have it in your life all the time and thinking about it all the time. And that's kind of our choice. So I know there's so many things that kind of came up and that I just wanted to share. And another piece that like with that poem at the end, right? Like right at the end where it's like, yeah, there was nothing because the trees just allowed you to be. There was no judgment. And it's so interesting to me because my brain went to like, oh, isn't that interesting? Because I work with like mastering fear a lot. And I was thinking, isn't that interesting? So without people, fear does not exist. Like without having other humans around, you're just not, there's no fear of judgment. There's no fear of failure because it all comes back to what other people will think of you, which kind of like blew my mind. But that's the thing. It's like we are meant to experience others in our life and then being able to kind of see how, as part of that experience, we are going to have that judgment. And how do we just allow that to be part of our life and really just, in a sense, like embrace it, really just love on us being human beings who have judgments on each other, and we can have fun with it if we want to. Yeah, kind of went on a tangent, but that's my share there.
Yeah, I'm going to bring all the pieces together with, go ahead, Nuria.
I love what you said, Vanessa, because you said it like a word that just brought up so much joy to my space right now. That is allowance, right? Like when you are in allowance, you have the opportunity to choose. What would I choose? Do I choose to be right or to be free? So when I am in the space of judgment, because it's a human default, I was raised like that. Like judgment happens quietly or secretly, but it happens. So when I am in that space, right now, I'm aware of it. I'm responsible because I'm aware of it. And when I can acknowledge that, I can take other people's judgment as an interesting point of view. So if I take that judgment as an interesting point of view, I allow that person to be in the space in the same way that the tree allows me to be in the space. It's a point of view. As you said, is this meaning something? No, it's a point of view. And I really like something that is like is on me right now is what Stephanie said. Like, what is our responsibility as role models for those new generations to break on that system, to break on that pattern? I would say is like everything around you is an interesting point of view. And your interesting point of view always change over time because as nature changes, we change. And that's the hope, that we change as much as possible to be in a constant evolution and to be in constant transformation. I think that's the hope.
So awesome. You got all the pieces. So I'm going to stitch it all together. Well, yes, the poem is telling us there's really only the moment, because she said, I'm just allowed to breathe, right? Every breath is where you are. And our judgment actually take us out of the moment. We lost the moment. And so we're not actually allowing ourselves or others to just be. And a judgment is really about the other person, is their stuff. And the way we were raised and conditioned, the training was that other people's reaction, judgment, that's the error, was about us, right? That's the error. And that's what we can do for the future generation and how to raise children, is to make that correction. And we are just being. and you're not fixed. Like, we don't judge the tree, when it's small, like, you're too small. It's just being and then growing, right? And so, yeah, there's lots of, yes, Stephanie.
I just wanted to throw in a comment because I think of people in the audience who might be just starting their introspective journey. Like, just to remember, these are women who have been really thinking about this for a long time. That's why, like, I know a lot of people, especially if they're new to, coming to Canada or the US, they're just thinking about survival. They can't even think about witnessing or judgments or, even connecting, and because they don't think there's any other way. So yeah. There is a time where you're going to be able to start to reflect instead of thinking that you have to be on defense mode, survival mode all the time. But even if you just allow yourself that space to start to question or start to be like, oh, wow, and just step back for a minute. And it takes practice. It's not easy. This is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Our mind is thinking, how am I going to make rent next month? How am I going to support my children in this country? Like, you take a moment back, even if that's 5 minutes of your day, to just start to witness and see, so you can start to open your awareness a bit. There is a way to be mindful and still in a 24-hour period. So we just want to.
I'll give a practice right now.
Oh, good.
Practice right now. So there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just an idea put in your mind because of some event that happened, and we made up that interpretation. So you have to free yourself. So if you notice you're feeling ashamed or guilt, whatever, you can actually put it down. You can take it off like a piece of clothing and put it down. And just see if you can create the space that we talk about. That's like the forest, where there's no judgment, where you're just being and there's nothing wrong with you. And you can start here's my point to start from zero. I'll give an example with my son, because we do this work together. So we hold each other accountable. He sees myself, he tells me, and it's really beautiful because we learned to take responsibility. That's how nice this plays itself out. So he didn't want to listen to me about getting ready. And then, of course, as it plays out, because we need to learn about cause and effect. That's another law, right? At the end, we were rushed, and I just stood there and watched him. And he's angry. He's very angry. He's so angry, wanted to throw his shoes, and he stained the wall. And I said, you don't have to feel bad. You can start over right now. Right? So he can choose to clean up that space. And isn't it beautiful to learn this when you're young? Because we could be mad for hours and days. We can hold on to one emotion from one incident because we're not just being present and breathing. We have that moment of judgment, which is trapped, right? So, and, he let it go. And then I held his hand and said, good job. You did great. So it seems impossible, but it's just because we're not trained. That's all. You can start from zero and be brand new and fresh and good again. I just noticed and let it go. And you can be in that space the forest was holding for you and just be present and breathe. And you're perfectly fine. You can always start fresh. There's nothing wrong with you. So no need to fight, because all that fighting makes that thing so big. And it can just vanish because it's a concept. It's a mental thing. And as you shift that, your energy change and you'll recreate something different right there. And then the forest is always there for you.
Well, here's where I actually so Stephanie, Nuria, and I, we're going to be getting together to create a tool for all of us. So look out for that to help support us when we have the busy mind, or even after these sessions, because these discussions do bring up quite a bit. And learning how to actually process our emotions, learning how to actually move that energy out and connect with nature within. So I'm happy to share that. But yeah, so I invite all of us to if you are not in our community yet, please join us in the Facebook community, Living in Between Worlds. Come join us and share with us if there's any new topics that you want us to discuss. We're here every other Thursday, and we will just kind of bring it all back together. And normally, that's another thing. On Monday, Stephanie, we're doing the same topic as well, right? or is it? Yeah. So Enslavement of the Spirit. So we invite you to come and join us in the discussion on Monday night. We'll post the link in the description or chat box, actually, or the comment. And we invite you to join us in that discussion.
Thank you, everyone, to hold this space and have this conversation that I'm always curious about. And we got to do this together.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.